right, tonight's meeting. We are that real friends with Striking Succulent Gardens, and he's in the Central Coast area. He's a devout advocate for all things green and growing. He is the head dirt monger at Gardens by Gabriel Incorporated, a licensed landscape design and build firm on the Central Coast of California. He and his team enjoy working with clients to create one-of-a-kind outdoor living environments that infuse water-wise beauty with artistic flair. Outside of building landscapes for others, he can be found cultivating edibles, succulents, and Mediterranean natives in his own home demonstration garden. He's a father to 2 young girls and enjoys pedaling Hannah and Claire on their orange e-bike through the hills of Morro Bay. Everyone, please welcome Gabriel Frank.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Happy to be here. Yeah, appreciate you guys having me. Yeah, let me share my screen here and we can start. So I think it might stop this previous screen sharing in order to me to share my screen. Is that okay? Yeah, okay. Just giving me that notice. All right, how are we looking? Everyone can see? Yeah, good. Okay, cool. Well, I wanted to say kind of thank you and welcome. So I wrote this book for people like you, people interested in the botanical world and plants of all sorts. So it's really kind of an introductory level book, kind of into some intermediate stuff. So I wanted it to be really applicable and kind of easy to dig into how to utilize succulents in your own garden and get the full potential out. So I'll kind of walk you through some highlights of some of these are for the book. Some of these are just from outside the book too. Yeah, I wanted to make it more accessible. Succulents are super popular and they tend to be pretty available now. So just some techniques and a little bit of design stuff I wanted to go over, kind of thinking a little more broadly on them. So we'll get started. Just a little background on me. So I was originally an East Coaster. I moved out west after doing an internship in Mendocino. So at the Coast Botanical Garden, I did a 6-month internship as part of my program at the Botanical Garden. So really got hooked on the coast, all the cool plants we have, the year-round, just great weather. So, there was something special about this climate, so I really wanted to be here and yeah, see what the horticulture buzz was all about. So luckily I had parents that were gardeners, so I was, from the time being very young, I always remember cultivating edibles in my own space, and yeah, kind of got rolled around in the dirt from a young age. So I have my parents to be grateful for that. It was an early shot actually in the city doing window boxes in Chelsea. So yeah, we all have to start somewhere. So from humble beginnings, and now we're a pretty full service landscape company. We've been in San Luis Obispo for about 15 years. So yeah, I'm an avid gardener and passionate on all kinds of plants. And I'll focus on succulents because I think they're a really good solution to kind of our ever extending water crisis in California. So zooming out a little bit, so where we're at. So we're in a Mediterranean climate. So California shares this unique climate with 4 other zones around the globe. We have coastal Chile, a little bit of Argentina, parts of southwestern Australia, parts of South Africa, and then the true Mediterranean basin. So France, Italy, Portugal, Spain, those zones. So what we share, we're all on kind of maritime influenced, western edges of the continents. We get we can get fog, a lot of ocean cooling. So that's really what moderates our climate and makes it so enjoyable.
Come on, man.
I think a few people might not be muted. I'm not sure, but I can hear a little background. I'm not sure if that matters or not. So yeah, only 3% of the Earth shares this gardening environment. So we're in a super unique climate, our coastal influence. Not that many people can grow the variety of plants that we can grow. So all these neat succulents we can draw from all these Mediterranean climates around the globe. Succulents have a huge range of distribution. So there's a lot of aloes from South Africa. There's a lot of Rhodia shrubs that you guys are probably familiar with, also from Australia, South Africa, and then all the Mediterranean plants are great for that kind of core basin in Europe. So yeah, we're water challenged. That is our limiting factor. We only get rain in the winter where some are dry, but kind of understanding that and working with it, it's really a blessing, I think. So the succulent solution. So where do these plants come into our gardening opportunity? These are plants that are really built with hydration stores. They've been here for thousands of years. So they've developed adaptation strategies for much longer than we've been here. The word, kind of root word of succulent, succus, means sap or juice. So these plants are juicy. They hold that hydration within their tissues. Kind of parceling that out as dry times extend, and they use it as needed. So minimal maintenance. These are easy plants. You're probably familiar with them, but there's not a lot of work to do. You do a little bit of grooming occasionally with some leaves, but there's not traditional kind of pruning, hedging, deadheading. So they're really not fussy plants. So a lot of people just don't have the time to put in as much time as they would love into their gardens. So they're a very low maintenance selection. Yeah, easy to grow, so they are forgiving. If you forget to water, you'll notice they might shrivel a little bit, but they don't die so quickly. So there's kind of a built-in grace period with succulents. I consider every succulent garden an on-site nursery. So you will have more plants than you will know what to do with, whether you like it or not. So it's really a good passage to share with your friends, plant other areas in your garden. Yeah, they're very giving plants. So you can tell they just want to grow and share their wealth with others. They're also really bold features in the garden. So they have a sculptural quality to them. They make really great focal points in pots. Even if you don't want to have a succulent dominated garden, they can make nice accents on an entry or eye-catching with their geometric forms. So just a few basic kind of tenets of how to garden with them. They do like good drainage. This is common for most plants. So if you're in sandy soils, you're in good luck. They originate from sandy or well-draining soils, but it doesn't mean you can't garden with them if you're in clay. So if you're in heavier soils, all you have to do is kind of mound up. So berming up with some soil allows the crown of the plant to get out of that heavy soil. So just the issue with the heavier soils is they don't drain as well. So that crown where the trunk or stem of the plant meets the root flare, that's kind of the Achilles heel. So if you can elevate that up and get it in some well-draining soil, that's the rot point. So they can root down into heavier soils. It wants to drain away from that crown readily. So sunshine, yeah, plus or minus at least a half day. Some plants which I'll go over, much more shade tolerant. But again, they're all pretty adaptable. Some like more sun, so kind of more of the cacti, agaves, like a little more sun, but really if they get 4 or 5 hours, it's fine. Not everyone has 8 hours of blazing sun in their garden. Hydration, so there's a little bit of a misnomer. Succulents don't like water. So they actually do appreciate water. They just like it occasionally, and then they like it to come, and then they like it to go quickly. They don't like boggy conditions or for it to stick around. So you do want to establish them like any other plant. You keep them kind of moist for the first year, and then after that, you can cut back the water pretty significantly. So I might water twice a week if you're doing drip. That first year, maybe once a week. Year 2, year 3, and maybe once a month or kind of as needed. There's areas in my garden that are 4 to 8 years old that don't receive any water on the coast in Morro Bay. So that's the goal, really, is gardening with these plants are increased drought tolerance as you establish them in your garden. Just another thing to keep in mind is kind of knowing your zone. So if you are inland a little bit, you have a little bit more cold climate, or you're in a mountain region, you want to just make sure that there's some cold hardiness. So some of the Aeoniums and Echeverias that I'll show later in the show aren't quite as frost hardy. They're a little bit tender. The agaves, a lot of the cacti are kind of the hardier members of the tribe, so they can take some frost and freeze. So you probably know if you're in a colder climate, but just looking into those plants, not everything is a fit. On the coast, you can pretty much get away with anything, but just a reminder to kind of check if you get a little bit chillier. Gopher cages are the other just kind of cheap insurance. I find in California, either gophers or ground squirrels are not an if, but a when. So unless you're really insulated, they tend to come, and just when that choice plant is getting nice maturity, then they know to dig in and take it down. So they especially like agaves. There's something really sweet, carbohydrate rich about that core. So we used to cage just agaves, and now we just cage everything because they're hungry and your plants are tasty. So use gopher cages if you can. So I wanted to go over just a few design principles that I touch on in the book. So just wanted to say, you don't need to be a designer to have a stunning garden. You don't have to go to school or have a degree or any type of initials. It's really just kind of a thought process. It's really similar to kind of laying out items in your house or thinking about different colors and textures. So I'll walk you through a little bit of how I see the garden, and that might be, insightful. So what I wanted to touch on was scale, rhythm, texture, and contrast. So these are just basic principles for laying out really anything, indoor, outdoor. If you have a new area that you're going to do and you like to draw, I recommend sketching it out. It's not essential, but having a drawing just allows you to think it out through the process before you buy a bunch of plants and maybe you have too many. We tend to kind of overplant our gardens. Gardeners are collectors, and that's okay. It's the fun part of being a gardener and a collector, but if you have a little bit more organization, it can help at least anchor and have some themes that run through your space. So graph paper is already scaled. You can buy one of these. They're little kind of architect scale, so that's a cheater. So they already have it scaled out of inch equals 4 feet. So play with that if you're going to take on a new area. I think it helps. It can really show you kind of the maximum. You want to plan for the mature size of plants also. So you can draw out circles and where your path is going to be. Just helps you visualize. So scale is really kind of the notion of just balancing proportions. So having scale in the garden just creates an environment that looks and it feels good. So we're working with having objects of different sizes in the garden and the dynamic that is created between those to create kind of a harmony in the garden. So the image is the demonstration here. This is from our Morro Bay front yard. You can see the Morro Rock in the background if you've ever visited up here. So our anchor tree is the tree aloe here. So that's our focal point. That's about 10 to 12 feet tall. That's what's going to kind of capture your attention in the space. Stepping down from that, kind of the next layer would be a shrub or something in that 5 to 6 foot range. So in the background, you can see my cursor, but these are leucadendrons. These are a protea that are a great grower on the coast. Nice reddish kind of leaf clusters. The proteas are great shrubs. They tend to be in that size. So that would be kind of a filler, nice textural component that can be a good backdrop. In front of that, more of like a 3 to 4 foot plant. So those might be in different kinds of aloes, a nice perennial or grass that you're using, anything that takes up kind of that ground layer. So I was working with a couple layers allows you to create that relative scale to each other. So you have kind of a sense of natural maturity in the garden. So rhythm is really creating unity in the space. So it comes from repeating similar plants to form a theme. Themes are good when you have a lot of plants. So again, we're plant collectors and we have high diversity. And you can have a ton of plants in the garden, but if you have kind of a stronger theme that anchors the garden through, like say we're gonna do linear plants here with kind of thin leaves. So we're working with this bottle tree on the upper right here. And then we're repeated by these different yuccas. So we've got two silver beaked yucca here. And then we've also got these agave, twin flowered agave, gemniflora. So we've started to get this theme where the eye kind of was like recognizes, oh, there's like a similarity, there's continuity running through the space. So with that recognition, then you can kind of improvise with lots of other variety. And there's some kind of a grounding thread holding it all together. Other kind of themes we're repeating are this ground cover along the path. That's Diamondia. So it's nice. You can pop out a few Echeverias out of this ground cover, and then it kind of hops the path. You can continue it. So it creates this river effect of running through the garden. Yeah, this is kind of a different clump here in the agave. This is agave blue flame. So that's kind of a nice contrast. You know, it has some chunkier wide leaves against all these thin kind of linear leaves. So yeah, repetition really creates unity within the space. So form, texture, and contrast. These are all related concepts. You can kind of see how they relate here. So imagine your landscape in black and white, you know, without the color. What does it look like? So that's what we're working with is really the form and the texture of these plants. So the weeping bamboo in the back would be considered kind of a fine texture. So when we say texture, we're working more with a visual texture, not a felt, like a fuzzy or a smooth texture. So that weeping bamboo has a very fine texture, small leaves, they're kind of wispy in nature, a soft kind of vibe to it. So in front of that, we've got a very coarse texture, this agave. That's the whale's tongue agave is the common name. So really oversized leaves, kind of like a Jurassic Park style agave. very bold looking. So it stands out really nice, kind of against that fine drop background of the bamboo. The other textures we have going on are also this horizontal fence. So this is kind of as a contrast to all the organic leaves. Something linear like this can give these plants a backdrop. So we have this yucca bright star up front. It's the variegation, the yellow and the green that you see. So I would say that's kind of like a medium on the texture scale. It's not quite fine, it's not quite coarse. So yeah, some other slides to just give some examples of those principles. So this is a front door shot of the home garden. So as an anchor plant, we've got that dark green acanthus. Bear's breeches is the common name. It's a really good part shade foliage plant. So this side of the house doesn't get a ton of sun. So we're working with more foliage, interesting colors, textures of plants. So we're using that acanthus as kind of our center point backdrop plant, anchor of the space. And then the highlights would be this variegated agave that we're repeating through. So this is agave ray of light. It's just a neat cultivar of the common foxtail agave. In the shade, it's nice to have some variegation. These leaves really show up nicely when you don't have a ton of sun. And then your accent plants are more your Echeverias in here, these light pinks, and then some small Aeoniums, some nice detail plants to wrap around your main theme. This would be an example of just repetition in the garden through kind of a common plant. So kangaroo paws are pretty well known. Really good bloomers. This one is an especially tall variety called Big Red. It's neat. So we mixed in some succulents here. You can see there's common chalk sticks in the front. This is our just straight green foxtail agave. We've repeated these. And then really the kangaroo paw kind of takes the stage here as we've woven these through the space. So when they bloom, it seems kind of like a symphony throughout the garden. They're all going off at the same time. Yeah, they wanted that abundance theme. So we used that plant to really grab the attention. Again, kind of a nice contrast between the coarse leaves, some of the succulents, and then the fine kind of grassy leaves of the kangaroo paws. So I want to get into just some different plant specifics, so types of succulents we can use. So Echeverias, these are hens and chicks, known commonly. Aeoniums, sometimes called velvet rose. They have a lot of surnames. And then the Crassula family is a really big succulent family. So these are jades, kalanchoe, dudleya, different seed and ground covers. So I would call these more of a living jewel plant. So Echeveria are probably one of the most common succulents for great reason. They have just really amazing colors. So all these pastel tones, amethyst, lavender, very jewel-like colors. They're also great bloomers, good hummingbird candy. So they do bring wildlife to the garden. They're good ground covers also. I'll show a few clustering types that can really be nice for yeah, decent size ground cover. They're easy to propagate too. They tend to pop out, so they'll colonize throughout the space. So they're really nice to propagate into other areas of the garden and yeah, share with others. A few types I wanted to highlight. So we've got the Mexican Snowball on the right. That's probably one of the more reliable Echeverias I find. It tends to cluster up pretty tight. So every spring you can come and cut some new offsets off, and we propagate new plants for our nursery just from these ground covers. These neat little petite pink flowers are really pretty. And then this Echeveria is called Agavoides. It is a more cold hardy variety. So if you are in kind of a chillier area, this can take some frost pretty well. It's the most cold hardy of the Echeveria clan. The other favorites, you know, there's a lot of Echeverias that I find not really durable in the garden. Some will last only a couple of years. These varieties I find to stick through. They tend to be more durable long term, especially this Echeveria Afterglow. This is just a really magnificent variety. So it's kind of hard to describe the color. They have these hot pink edges, and the interior are very aqua mixed with lavender. They're a very pretty plant. Tall flowers also, and I'll see these, you know, easily 5 to 6 years old in gardens that haven't even really been maintained, and they tend to form nice colonies. The other fun ones are the Ruffled Echeverias. It's kind of a general class for all the hybrids. There's tons of these varieties. They tend to have these neat kind of ruffle-like leaves. They resemble undersea creatures, kind of rain coral-esque. So they're just fun plants to feature in the space because they're unique to look. These are back to that Echeveria Agavoides. Just wanted to show them kind of in cluster form. So they'll develop these tight colonies. This variety up front is called Ebony. So it has really dark kind of burgundy black tips. The more sun you give it, the darker it will be. Behind it are, this one is called Lipstick. So you've got kind of more of a limey green foliage and that bright red tip. So I'll do Echeverias in a space, kind of like vignettes of them. You can do like a variation on a theme. So they're each a little bit different, but they're similar kind of rosetting plants. So it allows you to kind of have a theme, but then highlight all the differences between them. So on to Aeoniums. These are pretty, I would say, common plants as well. There's a ton of variety in these. There's a lot of variation. They tend to be pretty tall, like some of them 3 to 4 feet. Also ground cover types. So a pretty versatile bunch. Nice foliage. So this one is Zwartkop with a Z in the slide. Really dark purple leaves. It's a nice contrast for other kind of brighter leaves in front of it. They've got kind of those lime green centers also. So yeah, it's a nice color duality. They're good bloomers too. So they tend to bloom with these kind of large yellow Smurf hat looking flowers in the spring. They're pretty dramatic, and they're definitely a bee party when that bloom does happen. These are one of the more tender varieties, so they do great on the coast. They are a little frost sensitive. So if you're inland, yeah, these will get a little mushy if it gets too cold. So just be careful if you're in a little colder zone. Yeah, I mentioned the bloomer. So this is my daughter, Hannah, a couple of years ago. So these are easily in the 5 to 6 foot range. So they can be a pretty bold focal point in the garden as well, especially when they're in bloom. Aeoniums are really easy to propagate. So when people talk about succulents and just breaking a piece off and sticking in the dirt, this is the plant I think that earned that reputation. They're super simple. You don't have to wait for them to callus off. You really can just stick them in the dirt and they'll all grow. It's a very hardy plant. These are from the Canary Islands. Yeah, they're also shade tolerant. So shady areas in your garden, these have bigger leaves. They really seem to capture the light well. So if you have shade, these are a great solution. Just some close-ups on the foliage. The leaves are really bold and colorful. So Sunburst is a variegated selection. That tricolor leaf, the pink edge. And then Aeonium undulatum was the plant in the previous slide with the wavy edges on the leaves, which also gets quite tall. Aeonine Kiwi, this is one of the ground cover types. It's got a similar variegation to the sunburst in the previous slide. So that kind of yellow, green, and pink. Really good, kind of dense ground cover. I find it definitely smothers weeds out pretty well. It's just dependable. It always looks cheery. The flowers are fun and it's super easy to propagate. So you can create kind of large swaths of this in the garden. The last variety is Aeonium Velour. So some of the Aeoniums can get quite tall and a little bit leggy. And many aren't fond of seeing that stem, kind of the trunky bare leaf stem. They can have their own kind of Dr. Seuss-like character. But if you like a fuller plant, this is definitely a good variety. It tends to be bushy. It's almost like a shrub. You can see how many rosettes are on this shrub. This is just one plant here with a ton of heads. So nice dark kind of burgundy leaves, and again that limey green center. They just look like kind of giant flowers in the garden. So mixing all the different Crassula species is also a good idea. So you can see this is an entry to a patio that we had some natural boulder steps. So some carpets of, this is a Graptocedum that's leading up. These are some Aeonium canariensis. You can see peeking over the rock, there's a little bit of those Ruffled Echeverias. So yeah, they pair well, they mix well together. The last member of that Crassula, softer plants, are Dudleas. So these are really neat plants that are endemic to California. There are, especially if you go out to the Channel Islands, there are species that only grow on certain islands. So like only on Anacapa. There's varieties that only grow on Santa Cruz. Some of them are endangered too. So growing Dudleas in the garden is a good way to kind of, spread out that seed. They're available in most nurseries too, so they're not rare. Some of them in the wild are endangered. They have that chalky look, so commonly called chalk Dudlea. That white silver foliage really is a nice highlight in the garden, especially as the light falls and even at night. If you get a good moon out, they can be really beacons in the garden. They catch that light nicely. These are very drought tolerant plants also. They're one that kind of actually likes to go dormant, so they're used to our California dry summer. So they will kind of curl up their leaves a little bit in the summer season. They take a little rest, and then as soon as the rain comes back in the late fall, winter, they kind of have this resurrection ability and they unfold again like nothing ever happened. So there's kind of a cycle you can watch in the garden that's fun. Yeah, I talked about there's a ton of variation throughout the different species. Our native one is Dudlea pulverulenta. So it's a single rosette. They can get quite large. They're nice, like 12 to 18 inches. Yeah, they're a great bold plant. They mix well with other natives. So on the slide on the right, this is our California fuchsia. Yeah, that white tone is a nice contrast. They bloom for a long time too. So the flowers come in the spring. They emerge kind of this pink, and they don't really mature till the fall. So they'll get kind of a darker brick red as they mature, and then the seed is ripe in the fall. So it's a pretty bloom to leave up. So aloes. Aloes are just a fantastic family of succulents to use in the garden for their bloom and really dramatic form. They're probably one of the nicer bloomers of all the succulents. They tend to be warmer tones. So yellows, oranges, reds are the most common colors. They're a very versatile bunch too. So I'll show a slide. There's really large tree aloes. It can be a pretty dramatic focal point. into shrub, kind of ground cover types. So there's really a lot of versatility within them. Yeah, tons of aloes to use. So the photo grid on the right is all just close-ups of different flowers. These are kind of like agaves, but they bloom nicer and aren't as pointy. So if you like that form of kind of a big rosette, but the spikes aren't your thing, aloes are definitely your plant. They can attain kind of nice size too. They can be that 3 to 4 foot range. A lot of them are trunking, which means for arborescent, they will develop kind of a main trunk in time. Those are the tree aloes. What's nice too is they tend to bloom in the winter, spring. So fairly early, so before a lot is really happening in the garden, that kind of little recess between when we get rains and when stuff starts to perk up, they're usually blooming then. So they provide a lot of color at a time when not much else is happening. These are just 3 of my favorites. So on the left, that's Aloe speciosa. So really neat flower, these pink buds, open to kind of like a white flower and with these green stripes on it and bright red stamens. It's really a striking bloom. In the middle slide, you can see me up against the tree. So the scale of that tree, this is all the aloes in the book were shot from a garden in Santa Barbara called Aloes in Wonderland. So I'd highly recommend if anyone's ever in Santa Barbara, make an appointment. He's got a huge botanical garden. It's just his home garden. And every plant is for sale. You can go and you can dig up any plant that you want to buy. So he's got just a fantastic collection. So this is me in his garden with one of his older tree aloes. So these can be a really nice specimen plant. They do get big, so you want to plan for these to get some size. You know, this is probably a 30-year-old plant, and it's probably around 50 feet tall. The plant on the right is the fan aloe. This is a really nice, just adaptable, hardy aloe. It's got a unique growth pattern, these kind of menorah-shaped fans of leaves. A lot of people wouldn't even guess it's an aloe. Great blooms, these stalks of orange flowers, and it will take on like a bonsai-like appearance over the years. So it's kind of shrub-like, and the trunk will open up. It's got neat branch work, and you can have a fairly old plant, and they'll only be 3 to 4 feet tall. Just 2 others that are worth mentioning. So the mountain aloe, these are one of the biggest bloomers. So they have that candelabra-like bloom. They tend to be bright oranges and reds. The slide on the right here, we've got aloe moonglow. So there's a lot of breeding in the aloe world being done to select for denser plants that are a little smaller scale, so fitting the smaller spaces. You can see this is that kind of shrubby size, they're about 3 to 4 feet. And just when they bloom, they're covered with hundreds of flowers. So really good hummingbird habitat. They tend to fight over them when they bloom. They're very territorial, so it's a fun air show to watch. For scale, you can actually see that mountain aloe in the slide on the right blooming in the background. So it definitely has a good proportion. This is an aloe that can get a trunk on it too. So in time it will get a trunk, and these can grow to about 5 or 6 feet tall. So the spinier side, so you know, cacti are everywhere. They're kind of interesting plants, but it's nice to kind of be drawn in or introduced to them. So once you're kind of, you know, you've been gardening with the softer succulents, you'll realize these they become of interest. They're very hardy, like extremely drought tolerant. And if you're in kind of colder or even hotter areas, these are kind of the toughest of the whole clan. yeah, most xeric and really the least maintenance of any of them. So I'll demonstrate how to work with them too. You don't have to get poked, so that's not a necessity with cacti. If anyone's curious, this is a little bit more of a plant nerd question, but what's the main difference between cactus and succulents? So the presence of areoles. So succulents don't have areoles, cacti specifically do. So the slide on the left here, these are areoles, these kind of white tufts on the plant. On the right, this barrel cactus, you can see them, there's usually a lot of fuzz around them and they tend to be protected or obscured by spines. So when cacti went through a big adaptation period and it was dry on the earth, they decided to shed their leaves. They were losing too much water through transpiration. So they became a simple photosynthetic stem to conserve as much moisture as possible. So the areoles developed as kind of a multi-purpose bud. So out of these can sprout new branches, new flowers, new growth points. So they're kind of a versatile node for the plant to grow. So just some demonstrating different forms of kind of the harder succulents or cacti. If you're interested in growing some columnar cacti, the one I would recommend to start with, the center slide, is the San Pedro. These are really fast growing. A lot of cacti can be painfully slow. This one is actually pretty quick. You can see a foot or two of growth per year on them. So they're rewarding. They're very easy plants. I've actually never had one die, and I propagate them quite a bit. We will bare root them and we'll kind of let them harden off and stick them in the soil and given them to a lot of friends. I've shipped them to the East Coast. Yeah, they're doing well in Birmingham, Alabama. So it's a fun plant if you're interested in growing cacti. They also have minimal spines. They're not super pokey. So they're a little friendlier as far as cactus go. Just wanted to highlight kind of the symmetry here. An agave. Ocahui is the specimen on the left. That's a Mexican species. And then on the right, we have our typical prickly pears. So these are common. This variety, Santa Rita, is really nice. It gets the lavender kind of purple on the pads when it also gets cold and hot. This one is compact, so it only gets about 3 to 4 feet. So if you want to get into some agaves, but again, you don't necessarily want some of the rigid spines, these are two great ones that have a softer look, and yeah, really they don't have any spination either. So on the left, we have the Squid Agave. So this is Agave bracteosa. This is a variegated specimen. I think it's called Monterey Frost, or there's a few variegated selections, but very graceful, kind of recurving of the foliage. It really, yeah, it embodies that undersea character. And its kind of larger cousin on the right, the octopus agave. So this is also a variegated selection with that wide yellow band. This is called stained glass, this variety. So the octopus agave is pretty fast growing. So it also will bloom out quicker. So if you want a plant that really puts on some size quick, they're pretty speedy. Those plants in the shot are probably about 4 to 5 years old. We planted them in a 5-gallon. What's neat is even they do bloom out. They're a type that will get bulbils or small agaves on the bloom stalk. So they're kind of ready to go little plantlets that form on the bloom. So agaves, most of them are monocarpic, which means that after they bloom, the mother plant actually dies. So it'll either provide you pups from the base for that new plant, or those little bulbils that I'm talking on the stem are like ready to go. So we're kind of putting those back in the garden or propagating them for the next generation. So safe handling. So yeah, plants with spines, you just have to take a few more precautions when you're handling them. So we use towels a lot as a sling. So in the shot on the right, this is a taller, that kind of columnar cactus. So we've just slung it for carrying, and usually 2 people is helpful. So if you have a plant, you can kind of pre-dig your hole. You can put this, the root ball in and just use the sling to kind of stand it up. You've got more of a barrel cactus. On the slide on the right, you can just wrap it with a towel and use that as like a carrying handle. Use leather gloves, just kind of move slow with them. And it's pretty easy to not get too poked. You're still going to get poked occasionally, but I think that's just, they want to let you know they're there. So just some other applications working with succulents. Containers are such a great fit. Many of you are probably familiar with them, but they do well in shallow soils. So when you have smaller containers, or containers that dry out quicker, they're very adapted to those. Doing mixed pots on the left. So this is a neat Kuan Yin, a centerpiece, some different Echeverias. We've got some Aeoniums. There's some sedum ground cover around the edge. And in the back, this is a Coprosma, a mirror bush, and then also a woolly bush in the back for some texture. On the center, these are actually plow discs from a tractor. So you can create these little dish gardens with these plow. They're not that deep, they're only 4 to 5 inches deep. So you can buy these online or get them from Tractor Supply. So they're kind of a little dish garden to go. We put them on some pipes at different levels, and they're kind of a nice eye level thing. You can actually see out the window from this house. We also make planters pretty easily. These are brake drums off 18-wheelers. So they're something that they actually dispose of. So certain places will save them for you. I have a quarry that they run a bunch of big trucks and they just scrap them. So I asked them to save them for me, and they're kind of a ready to go planter. You can make your own with just sheet metal. So this is just corrugated metal. You can really kind of, you get some sheets of metal, you can bend it in a circle, you can overlap the ribs by a few notches, you put a few screws in them, and you have kind of a ready to go planter that will attain that rust patina. So mixed gardens, this is really kind of bringing it all together. So the best of both worlds. Many people aren't going to have a succulent dominated garden. They're using succulents as accents or focal points. So this is a kind of an illustration to show that's possible. So we're on the left slide, we've got a lot of native red buckwheat. We have our native lime grass here. There's some salvias going in the background. And then you can see those Aeonium undulatum kind of popping through some different perennials. We've got the large leaves of our agave ray of light here, and then our path kind of creeping through. So they're really a good partner with all kinds of other drought tolerant plants. This is kind of a long view of that space through. So they're really foliage plants. So they mix well with grasses. There's bromeliads in here. Various ground covers. There's a large protea here as a backdrop. Corvillia big bird. So harmony in the garden. This is another just common example, mixing some varieties. So red hot pokers, Nethophia, these are known botanically. And then the kangaroo paws are kind of a nice foil for these big oversized agave rosettes. We've got some proteas in the backdrop. Showing just some mixing of plants. And that is my last slide. So I wanted to thank you all. And I can kind
Thank
of,
you.
yeah, open it up for questions. And then there's a little resource slide too. That's just
Yes.
tells you where you can get the book if you want like to order them online or whatever.
Yeah, so it's signed copies are available from Gabriel. Unsigned copies are available everywhere else, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Right.
We do have one question that was about whether or not the succulents and cacti are all, none, or some considered Mediterranean plants, because you did the Mediterranean thing.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. Yeah, so Mediterranean kind of being summer dry and winter wet when we get most of our moisture in the winter. So, do they follow that kind of moisture pattern? It seems like is more the defining characteristic. And also their origins, that they do well on the coastal conditions. So I find that, yes, so the majority of them are from Mediterranean regions. Some of the agaves are a little bit more desert zones, so they will get some monsoon rains in the summer. So typically where we would be a little bit drier, some of them that are more like southwestern, so like Arizona, Mexico, some of those will get a little bit of monsoon rains passing through. You can, usually we're giving plants a little bit of water as they're establishing. So once they're established, I find they don't really need that water, that summer water, but initially some of those will want a little bit of water getting going. But on the whole, I find they really they're from Mediterranean climates, and they do well in our climate as well. Similar treatment of other, Mediterranean plants.
Oh, that's great. I was just attracted to all your planters that then you made them out of found objects.
Yeah.
Really great. I was tell me again, it's what kind of a wheel?
Oh yeah,
brake?
sure.
What is it?
Yeah, so those are brake drums. So the way 18-wheelers, the big semis, they use that big hub as a brake drum, and they wear out. The steel gets worn off of them, so they have to pitch them at some point. They, usually give them to like a scrap metal place for nothing. So
Okay.
yeah, they're good. They're about 18 inches. They're a little heavier metal, but you can roll them around.
Okay.
And
but I was thinking, I wonder where he got those really artsy things. And
Yeah.
you said they were brake drums. Okay, I can get brake drums. That's awesome.
Yeah, they're scrap. So you want the bigger size or more off kind of the 10-wheeler trucks.
Okay.
Probably off a regular.
To go looking for this. This is gonna be fun.
Yeah, some kind of trucking place, or a quarry, places that run a lot of like sand and gravel. Those are the places that they'll use them. Or a place that does scrap metal, that actually recycles them. So those are good. And then, sheet metal is pretty available, just making your own circular planters too.
Gabe,
that's great.
Gabe, I have a comment. A lot of your, our, displays feature rocks. I think rocks are really important with succulents and cactus, because that's part of the natural Southwest dry Mediterranean climate. And I'd just like you to speak to that maybe a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we use a lot of rock in the garden. It's a really just naturalizing feature. So the plants grow in these naturally rocky zones. So that's where they originate. So when you bring rock into the garden, you're just creating that habitat immediately. It looks like they were always there. The rocks are also really good they provide little pockets for the succulents to kind of root under. So they provide also like a temperature buffer too. So they'll hold heat, they'll warm up in the day kind of slowly so they don't get hot too quick. And then they release that heat later in the day. So it kind of like acclimates the plant. So they're kind of like those adobe walls, so like that thicker wall has like a heat buffer built into it. So they actually help the plants kind of adapt with temperature extremes, and they just look great. Yeah, it's like putting a plant back in its habitat again.
My husband and my uncle had rock wars. They were collecting rocks from places that were being constructed where they needed to get rid of it because they were going to build something. And there was all this rock in their way. And they were like fighting each other for like getting it. Anyway, rocks are as collectible as plants, I found out.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Right on.
One of the questions is, what are the pollinators of succulents?
Yeah, good question. So a lot of the aloes and echeverias I find are bee and hummingbird pollinated. So you'll see both of those visiting the gardens. When aloes bloom, there's tons of bees around them. Some of them are just like a bee block party going on. And then they have good nectar too. So a lot of the aloes are South African in origin. So they have these birds called sunbirds that specifically pollinate those. So in the absence of these sunbirds, I'll find the hummers here are what really go in, and they're very nectar rich. So those tubular flowers they get their beaks right into. And yeah, the air wars. I'll see lots of fun happenings around the aloe garden.
One person has made more of a comment than ask a question, but she's already bought your book and she just loves your knack for including succulents in a mixed garden, and she's wanting you to know that thank you for the permission to vary from pure succulent plantings. That's a really great thing for people to break out of just the one plant type.
Right. Yeah, so right. Such a good point. Yeah, it really, I mean, the majority of gardens that we do are mixed because there's so many cool plants to grow in California, and people want to still have nice flowers, flowering penstemons and sages. So they really harmonize well together. So yeah, thank you. I try and allow that to just be like, we can mix all these plants together. Just, think about them in a design way, and they're drought tolerant. So they really partner together culturally.
Yes. And so that brings us to the question, do you recommend fertilizer for succulent gardens? And if so, which ones are the best?
Yeah, so it depends on your soil. So if you're kind of in sandier soils, which tend to be lower nutrient soils, they drain really well, so nutrients kind of leach out. What I tend to do from the get-go is we are big just on amending with lots of compost in the beginning. So I find that really holds them over for a year or two if you use good amendment in the beginning. And the way we do it is not just in the holes, but we blanket the entire planting area with 2 to 3 inches of compost. So then as the plant roots out into the area, it's really encouraged to root out everywhere and not just in the planting hole. So I find compost is really like a full spectrum food. Once they kind of get established, they're from low nutrient areas, so they don't need a ton of food. If you notice that they tend to look a little chlorotic or kind of lean, you definitely can fertilize them. So I always like organic food. So Dr. Earth makes a good food. The organic stuff is just slow release. So that's why it works well. They're not a plant that wants like a really high nitrogen. So a lower kind of analysis, when you see that NPK, like 3, 4, 5, something in that ratio or low numbers. So there's a number of companies that are offering organic products. You can get them at all the box stores basically now, or miners or nurseries.
Sure. That's great. Can you suggest a good book for Alpine succulents?
Yeah, there's one called, I have it, it's called High and Dry.
Oh, what a cute name.
Yeah, that's a great one. So I think it's the author's out of Colorado, so higher elevation, of course. Yeah, that's a good one
Okay.
for definitely Alpine
Super.
stuff. There's some neat yuccas and even some cacti that are pretty cold hardy. There's a section, I have a good chart in the book on cold hardy cacti, even down to zone 4. So there's some really cold hardy, a few yuccas and these little kind of miniature barrel cacti that are very hardy.
Neat.
Yeah.
So Ray Brooks, he's the bowl maker.
Oh yeah. Beautiful mulberry bowl, by the way. Those are awesome. Yeah.
Neither you and I didn't win it, so we're cranky. So Ray says, are you telling me, that's why I'm telling you who said this, that my whale's tongue agave is going to get as big as the one you showed?
Eventually it will. Yeah, they're a beautiful plant. They get really chunky and kind of dense. So that plant there was probably 6 to 8 years old. So they take a while to get there.
How old is yours, Ray?
Yeah.
Mine's about 3.
Yeah.
And it's already more than 4 feet across.
Yeah. Yeah,
so if
so
it's
I'm
going to get to be
happy.
8 feet across, I might have to move it.
Yeah, that one's probably, or I've rarely seen them over like 6 feet, like 5 to 6 feet. 6 feet is usually pretty max, but it depends. Sounds like yours is really happy in its location. So
It
Yeah.
is happy, and I'm happy with it just the way it is.
I know. Yeah. Don't get too big. Yeah, they are kind of a denser grower, so it's like they're putting on size, but they tend to slow down probably when they're in your range. They're not growing as quickly, but it's a beautiful specimen.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think I'm out of questions. I've been scrolling up and down here. I think I've asked all the questions. Everybody is just has enjoyed this so much. Very positive comments about the beautiful gardens that you showed us and the combinations. It was just lovely. And thank you for just beautiful gardens to look at. It's so inspiring.
Yeah. Cool. I'm glad that was inspiring. Yeah, I'm just trying to spread the succulent love here. So
Okay, there's another one. Oh, this question is, what are the 3 large succulents in the photo on the screen right now?
Yeah, so those are a euphorbia. And they're good coastally. They're a little bit frost tender, but they do great in your zone. So that's Euphorbia AMAC. AMAC is AMMAK. So that's
It looks, am I right that one is a much lighter color than the other 2?
Yeah, so there's a variegated one. The plant on the right, they call it, it's a variegated, it's yellow. So it's really like a pale yellow.
Okay.
And then it gets this like black stitching on it. That's kind of these little barbs of spines. They're easy to handle though. They're not really spiky. They're kind of small, but so there's a green one in the center. The one in the center and then the one to the left are just a straight green species. And the variegate is that really nice kind of lemony yellow. So yeah, they're both nice vertical plants in the garden. They call it the candelabra euphorbia also. So they get that just kind of stellar shape to them.
So yeah, that's great. Okay, so Jim Bishop is saying if anybody wants the arms of the variegated ones,
yeah,
he has them for free if you pick them up. So everybody message Jim.
Yeah.
The the windstorm in January disfigured my 25 by 25 foot tall one, and I need to cut
Oh,
big arms out of it, and I haven't gotten around to it. So I got some arms from 2 feet up to 8 feet, if you want them.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Don't let that opportunity go by, people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't give away a couple batches. I had a hard time getting rid of them. Nobody wanted them, but
Really?
when you
Wow.
buy them, they're real expensive. Those arms sometimes in the nurseries that are rooted
Yeah.
are up to $2 and
They're
Yeah.
very expensive.
smaller than the ones I have. So
Hey, Jim.
I noticed, Gabriel, that several of the houses were really brightly painted, and I wondered if
Mm.
you got the job and the house was painted, and then you matched or did they get this garden and say, "Hey, we want it to really pop, like this house looks red to me with a green roof"?
Right. Yeah.
Do you
Good
have
question.
do you have anything where the house backdrop is a part of the design, and then
Yeah. I mean, the house is really like your backdrop for the garden because we're juxtaposing the garden against the house. So I find people that are into gardening and plants are just into more lively colors. Like we love color.
so they already had that color when they got here.
Yeah, they already had the color
Okay.
without me. So I'm like, yay, we got like an awesome backdrop to plant against. So yeah, it was I mean, when people ask me too and they have kind of a drab color on the house, I'm always like, well, yeah, there's some livelier colors. So I'm happy to discuss and chat about it. Some people have gone that route too, but many people, we show up and they already have a great house color.
That's amazing, because it really did make a difference when that house color was making the plants pop in several of those photos.
Yeah, so right.
Makes me want to paint my house a different color now.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So looks like now I am out of questions unless I missed any. I'm trying to be thorough here. Thank you so much, Gabriel. This has been fabulous.
Well,
Everybody
yeah.
needs to, if you want a signed copy, buy it on his website, gabrielsgardens.com, right? Gardens by Gabriel.
Gardensbygabriel.com.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
You'll see a link. There's our new book, and there's a whole section just where you can email in your address and send you out some.
Okay, but if you need it quicker than him signing it, then head on over to your favorite bookseller, either online or in person, and get his book. And okay, looks like just the accolades are coming in. With thanks for a beautiful presentation. So
Sure.
I'm very inspired. I'm gonna go to a salvage yard as soon as possible. I never thought I'd say that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you can find some great stuff at the salvage yards for sure.
So, Jim Bishop, there's a plant swap app called Blossom, no second O.
Cool.
You can put the word out there that you have free plants. Okay.
Neat.
There's an app for everything.
Oh yeah.
All right, everybody. I think we're gonna call it a day. So I look forward to. Oh, Susie says I may never end this meeting. I recommend, Susie Torrebueno says, I recommend joining the Facebook group San Diego Succulent Swap
Oh, cool.
for free plants. That's good. Okay,
There you go.
there you go. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you.